Welcome to the Data Science Hangout. Hope everybody's having a great week. If we haven't met yet, I'm Rachel Dempsey. I lead our pro community at Posit. And so this is our open space to chat about data science leadership, questions everyone's facing, and getting to hear what's going on in the world of data across different industries. And if this is your first time here, or if you're watching this recording at some point in the future, we're here every Thursday at the same time, same place. I should start saying now, we are going to take a little break for July, for a little summer vacation time, and there's a lot of people traveling. But normally we are every Thursday, same time, same place. So together we're all dedicated to making this a welcoming environment for everybody. We love hearing from you all, no matter your level of experience or industry or area of work. And so it's totally okay to just listen in here too, but you can also jump in the conversation and ask questions or provide your own perspective on certain topics in a variety of ways. So you could jump in by raising your hand on Zoom. You can put questions in the Zoom chat, and feel free to put a little star next to it, of course, if you want me to read it instead, if you're in a coffee shop or something. And then we also have a Slido link where you can ask questions anonymously too. And so this will be very important today because we are doing things a little bit different here. So if you were on maybe this was a few months ago now, where we had a random opening because one of our featured leaders was sick, we realized that we really liked this occasional format of us all being able to just jump in and be the featured leader. So we are all the featured leaders today. And so I wanted to also point out that because of that, if you wouldn't mind when you do jump in or ask a question, to just introduce yourself again too. I know some of us know each other pretty well now from coming to the Hangouts. So it might be nice to just do some introductions again too when you jump in and ask a question. But I can kick things off here with something I'd love to ask you all about. And this is something that's come up in a few conversations with people who have reached out on LinkedIn. A lot of times we'll feature different leaders here that are from larger companies who have like established data science teams. And at the same time, there's a lot of people who might be in the audience who are building up a data team for the very first time. And I was just curious to kind of open the discussion up with that, to learn from you all who are in that position of building up a data science team. What does that process look like for you, and how might that be different than working in one of these like large Fortune 500 organizations? And again, feel free to just raise your hand on Zoom or comment in the chat here too. Anybody like in the process of just like starting to build up a data science team, or you're thinking about building one?
Hey, Rachel, this is George.
Hey, George.
Hey. Yeah, this is actually like the perfect question for me, because I started a job about a month ago, and first data scientist in HR. It's a brand new role. And so kind of tasked with like starting from scratch with everything. So building out, metrics, defining metrics and doing data governance, learning a new system in HR. There's the HRIS, like the main source. And then from there, kind of like developing a team. So it's like starting from like even before, I think what you were talking about, which is like starting with a team, it's like even before that, which is, but having the mindset of like, this will turn into that, So I think right now it's like just looking at the different tools that are out there, understanding how we might manage a data lake and trying to find the right. I think right now we're kind of just looking at tools and kind of focused on that.
Yeah. How do you approach that? Like knowing what to focus on first then?
So far, my approach has been to have discussions with our HR managers. So
Mhm.
those are the primary stakeholders, or the ones that are going to be leveraging the data,
Yep.
um, and communicating it to either like higher up or to the different managers within the organization.
Mhm.
And also thinking about security, and because with HR data, it's highly, secure,
Yeah.
the information that we share. We don't always want to share demographics. So also thinking about security policies.
Mhm.
Um, but just a lot of, yeah, just a lot of conversations with people about what their business needs are.
Definitely. I see, I'm just looking over to the chat here too. I see Eugene, you had a few thoughts on this topic. Do you want to jump in here?
Sure, I'll say hi. I had to build a team at a previous position. I'm currently a team of one, and hopefully we'll be building a team soon. I think there are very few unicorns, which I put three things up there, like that there's a use case and a necessity. Sometimes you need somebody to be able to build things as fast as possible. So you got to go for a programmer or people who really know programming, who can build a pipeline, who feel they understand production level stuff, have dabbled in multiple tools, et cetera, et cetera. I can't necessarily rely on somebody like that to be the math genius, someone who understands integration and probability distributions and difference between a Poisson and an exponential and la, 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 la. That person also has a lot of value and everyone can learn from them too. And sometimes if you're in a place where you need very sophisticated modeling to sort of take a leap up, you need a person like that probably who can bring in that extra skill set. And then there's the contextual experts, and that I'm currently in a position where I'm not a contextual expert. I am in bioinformatics, which is my first foray into the medical field of data. It is the data is more disgusting in the medical field than pretty much anywhere I've ever seen, by the way. But the contextual expert probably in this role is more important than anyone, because they're going to be spending a lot of time trying to figure out, is this a generic drug, or is this a name of a brand, or what is an encounter? Why is this all event level data, and not something where it's at a patient level where I can do my analytics? How do I convert things from patient level to, or from event level to patient level? Like a contextual expert would be very, very probably the most useful person I would dive in on if I had to hire someone in a data science position to underneath me in a team in bioinformatics. So to me, the first question is really like, what are going to be the highest impact projects? And who of those three major skill sets would I dive in on to try and at least create my first employee, and then round out based on their weaknesses. But I would aim for trying to cover those three bases. If you're really going to build a whole team of 4, 5, 6 people, you really need people who are, in my opinion, really good experts at one of those three things, because it's very rare to find somebody who's an expert in all three, and you'd be paying out, a ton of money if you do find someone who's an expert in all three.
I think that kind of answers your question you had asked Libby too, but do you want to ask that to a few others here in the group?
Sure. Yeah, that's the sort of experience that I have with talking with people and interviewing with people, is that when they're building a team, they're looking for somebody to hit the ground running. And they always use that term, we need somebody to hit the ground running. And a lot of times what I feel like they're saying is we need somebody to do everything. And we also need somebody to tell us what to do, because we don't know what to do. And that feels really scary. Because I often think, well, I'm not that person. I'm a stats person, I'm an applied stats person. That's my side of the game. I can't be everything for everybody. So as a person who is looking at the industry, that freaks me out. It sounds like you guys are also saying that person doesn't really exist. And my sort of take on that is, if you have somebody who does everything and knows everything, they are now your single point of failure. And if they leave, something happens to them, all of your expertise goes in one person. And instead of needing to replace the one person who was maybe a SME or maybe the programming person, you now have nothing. So I'm curious about people's thoughts on building a team of people who are kind of lower level and not those unicorns, and how do you make that work? What do you look for?
Libby, I can't figure out how to raise my hand right now in Zoom.
That's
but
okay.
I
feel
probably
like-
should say that too. Yeah. So if anybody looks at the bottom where it says reactions, there's like a little smiley face.
Oh, there it
That's
is.
where
Yeah.
sorry, I should have put that in there. But
I
thanks,
was in
Katherine,
full
for jumping
screen.
in. Yeah.
I was in full screen, and so that had gone away. I feel like a lot of times looking for people who can hit the ground running is like corporate code for we are not going to onboard you or train you at all.
Exactly.
And that's really something that I think when you are building a data science team, you know, like they were talking about before, you need to say like, these are the people that I need and the skill sets that they're going to have. And then like build your onboarding around what that team's going to look like. One of the things that we've been doing is trying to get away from, oh, well, this one person knows everything. And so like for 6 months, all we did was write documentation about our processes and transcribe email chains from 3 years ago into things like that, so that when we do bring on new people, we can onboard them not only on the technical aspect of the job, but also on the context of the data, especially because we're in the medical field as well, where you are bringing on people who may not have had any medical experience before.
Definitely. Thank you all for, I'm trying to read through the chat here for people who want to comment on a specific topic too. Coulter, I see that you had shared when I first said about like starting the first data science team that you started a data team. And I'm curious, like, did you have to build up the business case for that, or were you hired on to start the data science team?
Yeah, hey everyone. Kind of almost both. So I work for a local government public health department, and it was essentially uncharted territory when it comes to data science. It was done in Excel, and I think I kind of tried to get buy-in on this from a selfish point of view, because I was doing all this data, and I was like, it shouldn't take this long. We were spending a ton of time trying to do all this. So luckily I had great leadership that said, you know what, that's right. We should start something, and started, was able to hire someone, and immediately just trying to convert everything to R, automate as many things as possible. And I guess I'll preface this next part. I love hand washing dishes because the catharsis from it. And the first time that we were able to show someone, hey, you know, this thing that used to take you 16 hours, it takes 30 seconds now. And the joy in their face, I will never forget that. And I think that really showed leadership. This is something worth investing in even further. So that was about 2.5 years ago. And, you know, like I said, we were able to hire one person to join, and now we are a team of 8, and it's been super awesome. Everything everybody's already said has been bits and pieces in our experience as well, either from security or just scaling, just things in general. So it's been fun. Still got a long way to go. A lot of cool stuff to learn.
That's awesome. You go from starting the team to 8 now. How did you figure out like what those roles should be, like those 8 people?
Oh, great question. I originally kind of designed it, and someone had just mentioned this, as, you know, hey, this person maybe focuses on specifically visualizations, maybe pipelines that get to visualization, and then realize for continuity of operation purposes, that wasn't going to be feasible. So switch to a different method of almost everybody's kind of trained on everything and can kind of do stuff if needed, but no one is really expected to be an expert at every other person's job, because that's asking a lot from people. And I don't think, as a leader, I don't think anyone should expect every person on the team to be that expert at everything.
Absolutely. I wanted to remind everybody to, if you feel okay or comfortable with it, just introducing yourself too, especially for people who are joining us for the first time here as well. Okay, let me double check, and Curtis and Hannah are helping me organize questions, but anybody else want to comment on this topic too? Oh, Alan, I see your hand. Did we lose Alan? Alan, can you hear us?
I can see
Okay.
you talking, Alan, but no sound.
Come back to Alan. Anybody else have thoughts on this, like building up your first data team?
Is that better?
Yep, there you are.
Okay. You know, like you turn on your computer one day and it's like, I don't have a microphone. What is a microphone? What was I gonna talk about? I think so. Sort of reflecting on the whole sort of circuit from what Libby was saying to Katherine, to Coulter. I was thinking about. I think I've had a really interesting experience with my team of saying for a number of years, like we need cross support ability for the things that we're doing, and finding that as the team grows, just the demand grows. We have more stakeholder teams that we're connected with, and people end up being kind of de facto, kind of drawn with dotted lines to those stakeholder teams and getting kind of specialized in those lanes versus being able to sort of share and cross support. And that's been a real challenge, because for years I've wanted to help certain folks who support really high intensity stuff to have more help. And I think probably I've had a combination of like really good luck getting good people on the team who come in and are eager to help to do that. But I think we hit a little bit of a critical mass with the team where there were enough people, and the team is now 6, and I have enough people who are curious and who are skilled, who can help without getting sort of completely pulled into the pool of being able to cross support. And so whether it's like disciplinary or subject matter expertise, I really have felt like in the last year, there's been like a tipping point of my team is big enough now that they can help one another. Whereas when it was 2, they were just like head down focused on getting stuff done. And then when it was 4, there was a little more room, but still pretty head down. And now with 6, there's enough of a cohesive team there that they can share, they can collaborate without me driving all of the collaboration. It feels like that size has really opened up a bunch of new opportunity that I don't think I could have created with 2 or 3 or 4 people. And it's got a whole new set of like working and leading challenges, but their ability to run has really taken off in such a cool way in the last 6 months as they've kind of got up to speed with one another. So I don't know if that leads to like a concluding point, but it's been really neat to see that transition over time as the team has grown and they've gotten to know one another, develop their skills, and develop their subject matter expertise. It's been really, really fun and rewarding to see them get good at what they do and get really good at helping one another. It's really cool.
That's great. Thank you, Alan. Katherine, I see your hand is raised. Do you want to jump in?
Yeah, I love that from Alan, because that sort of collaborative work really facilitates the rest of the data science. It's something that I've struggled with is, making sure that people get credit for doing that, where it frequently becomes, unseen work. You're not emailing a spreadsheet to someone, you're not, doing that, but fostering that relationship, sending, being active in your chat, be like sending out those emails to those teams, building a business use case around something is so important to staying connected to the rest of those teams. And so we have like a strategy for getting credit for that, but like if anyone else has anything where, how do you manage that unseen work, but also make sure that the people who are doing it still get credit for it? I'd love to hear about that.
Can I ask you, Katherine, what's your team strategy for that?
We do something every quarter called Take a Bow, where we basically have our members write up, and they do it in an R Markdown, but they write up everything that they think that they did throughout the quarter. And then they send that to me and my sister team manager, and we like aggregate that information and we escalate it up our reporting pipeline. So it's like, it's got the hard details of the stuff that we did. You know, here's the GitLab repo, here's, you know, the business value that this created, et cetera. But also I did all of these other things. Like I was active on my committee board. I like, you know, anything else that you're a part of that you want to make sure that you get credit for, you can escalate that. So I did kind of like outsource the like management of that credit, but it still makes sure that it's at least seen by like 1 and 2 levels above the person who's doing that work. But it's a lot of manual stuff.
Yeah. Somebody had recommended to me in the Our Ladies Slack group to like every week send yourself an email of all of the things that you did that week. So then at the end of the year or whenever you're showing your leadership team what you did, you remember all those little things. And I think a lot of what I do is sometimes that glue work that I sometimes forget, like, oh, that was really important that I did that and I connected these teams across the company. But if I didn't write it down for myself, I wouldn't maybe have remembered it or thought it was as important. Any other thoughts on what other teams are doing to kind of highlight some of that work? I see Aaron, you had a comment in the chat here. Oh yeah, around annual review time. Okay, Mark, I'm curious, what's your team's process?
Sorry, I was on mute. Yeah, Erin said that she in the chat that she keeps a OneNote open. My team, I work for a healthcare system in Houston on a group of analysts. We're really small. We have like 4 of us on the teams. We're really tight knit, but we all have our like little domain area of expertise. But we all do something similar. The only difference is we all share that same OneNote that our manager sees, and we like keep track of with weekly one-on-ones. So it's a really good way to just see across the year what you're working on and then like look back and see what you've accomplished.
Definitely. I see Jeffrey had asked a great question in the chat. I know you don't have a mic at the moment, so I'll read it. But the question was, at what point and how do you decide to stop focusing on the non-analytics work that has filled your backlog and push for more of the advanced analytics? A lot of our issue is requests come in and they are dashboards that should be done by more of a business analyst and not a data engineer or data scientist. But for us, it's difficult to dig out of that hole or find a stopping point. I see a few comments here in the thread of that. So I'll start with you, Jared, if you feel like jumping in here. And sorry if I'm
Hey Rachel, can you hear me?
Oh, there you are. Yes.
Sorry about that.
No worries.
No, yeah, no, I think it's just kind of like he was talking about further down, like chicken or egg. If you're getting to the point where the workload in the backlog is just becoming insurmountable, how do you do a more efficient job of organizing and kind of disseminating that to push the needle forward instead of just kind of being drowned under the work? So do you take the approach of trying to split the work and split the idea of having a focus on analytics versus non-analytics teams, or are you trying to hire more of those, unicorns that can do both sides of that to help? And how do you kind of manage or approach that? I think that's the big question for me anyway.
I thought something that was interesting on the topic of of dashboards is, I think it was, I'm blanking on who had said this, but if you stopped creating any of those dashboards, like which ones would people really notice that we're missing? And like which ones are we just creating for the sake of creating them and updating them?
I was remembering that too from
Yeah.
a couple weeks ago, and even going back to Libby's comment in the chat of like, what's going to happen if you don't do that? And if the answer is, $4 billion of critical business processes stop, then they probably need to hire someone to make that dashboard. And if the answer is like one guy gets a little upset, then like maybe you don't make it.
Exactly. Jonathan Remmers or Chris Umflett, I see you had some thoughts on this topic too. Do you want to jump in here? Let's see if anybody unmutes.
I was saying that I get frustrated because descriptive analytics has a bad name now. Nobody wants to come into our field to do descriptive analytics or reporting, but it's actually still very important. And you just can encourage yourself if the descriptive stuff you're doing is very important, like it's okay. And it's not always easy to put together either. But if you're trying to make that switch, you may have to first convince people of the value, not just say, oh, we want to do advanced analytics. They don't understand what that means. But like, what's the outcome that you want to achieve that you need to go do advanced analytics to get to? And some of what I've done internally is, talking to stakeholders in the company. What are their goals? What do they want to know? What are questions that they haven't asked? What are questions they don't ask because they don't want to be disappointed that there's not an answer? I will ask people to like think without any restrictions. Like, don't worry about what we can or can't do. What would you like to see? And then if you can get people who would sponsor, yeah, these are the outcomes we would like to get, then you have a little more weight behind that request to try to shift your time away from descriptive analytics to something else.
Thank you. Gerard, I see you have your hand raised here too. To jump in on this topic.
Yeah, I think what you just said is critical, because getting access to the data is usually one of the harder things to do. So if you have an executive who wants a report or a dashboard or whatever, you can break that deadlock in getting access to the data. And once you have it, you can do the more advanced analytics and start to build that business case of like, if we look at it this way, if we do more, we can give you more value. But in the end, getting that data and breaking up that process of getting the data, processing it and analyzing it in 3 different steps, it helps in a variety of things. It helps in building your team slowly, because those are sometimes 3 different expertises, and you can potentially give getting the data to IT so that you don't have to do it. So, it opens up time for your own analysis. It also makes it easier to go back all the way to the beginning of the discussion about hitting the ground running. You have people who are good at these 3 different things. And I think when they describe that they're looking for people who are hitting the ground running, are people that can answer that final question, that give that report to the executive and, give that final result. So if you can use that from a report, from a straightforward dashboard, if you can use that to break the deadlock in getting access to the data and start slowly building some analytics, I think that's a good way to start. You have to be very careful that to also what people were saying, that it doesn't become your day job and your only day job,
Can I just confirm with anybody here, what does descriptive analytics exactly mean versus advanced analytics?
I
Well,
kind of view.
I was thinking there's like this classic 3 or 4 step thing. It's like you have descriptive and then diagnostic and then predictive and then prescriptive. That was like something maybe 8-10 years ago that made the rounds.
I've seen that too, Chris.
What I think people, when they say analytics, they're talking about everything to the right of descriptive on that visual.
Okay.
Descriptive is like what is going on right now.
Yeah. It's,
How
we've
many of
counted it, we've
something?
made a plot,
Yeah.
this is what is happening or has happened. But diagnostic is kind of like what has happened. I think it's just, this is what it is.
Cool. Thank you.
Anything
And
you
Ralph,
can make a bar graph of, I think counts as descriptive
see.
analytics.
Ralph, I see your hands raised here.
By the way, you just can't do any of those other three things good at all if you don't do descriptive analytics.
Yeah, that's what I've found with
Absolutely.
working with clients is helpful is I actually made an image of a pyramid where the first layer is descriptive analytics and then predictive is smaller and then prescriptive is on the top. And so with the idea that majority of your time running your business and most of your efforts as a data team should be in that descriptive side, because that's the basis of anything to predict the future or making large changes in your business. So that's been helpful. And then I also started adding a basement of data management.
Yeah, I was going to
even
say if there's a
descriptive
data
statistics.
quality layer under there
Yeah,
somewhere.
I call it the basement, even though I don't know if pyramids have basements.
That's great. George, I see your hands raised.
Oh, yeah, I just wanted to chime in on the descriptive and to kind of reinforce what was said about, it's just as important and crucial and fundamental. And it made me think of actually this morning, I cracked open my Edward Tufte book and, just like in awe over the descriptive stats that are in there, but the way that they're presented in a way that solves a problem, right? Like there's the classic like cholera outbreak map that was done. And it's like, that's descriptive analytics, but it's just in a way that's telling a story. It's in a way that resonates with people. So it's not necessarily like, oh, it's just so simple and, maybe not worth our time, but it's more like, how do you convey those descriptive stats? It could be as simple as a bar chart, but is that really answering the question? Is that really getting to it? Could be descriptive stats, that's all they need, but again, like how it's conveyed is vital.
Definitely. Thank you. I'm loving this lively discussion here. Mike, I see your hand raised.
Hi, yeah. I was just going to say that I heard a great talk from a data science leader, I think working for one of the big supermarkets in the UK, who described descriptive analytics as kind of looking in the rear view mirror. So, what has happened. So maybe that's also quite a good analogy.
So do people generally use BI tools for more of descriptive analytics and predictive or whatever is past that is more of
I still
data
use
science?
R and ggplot for all of my descriptive analytics, but Power BI is really powerful too.
Mm-hmm.
They will usually rely on business analysts, to produce dashboards of descriptive statistics, but it doesn't necessarily ever imply that you're going to get that extra layer of context as to maybe why those stories are taking place.
Mm-hmm. I see on the topic of like getting rid of some dashboards, Mark, you had a great question earlier. Do you want to jump in here?
I think he had to run out.
Oh, okay. Well, the question was, does anyone have experience or suggestions for getting folks to agree to deleting dashboards? Mark said, our group has so many dashboards we maintain with only slightly different views of the same data set. And I have thus far been unable to get buy-in, even though the technical debt we've incurred is astounding.
I have a few comments on this. So I'm at Centene, along with Katherine, who's mentioned, who's talked a bit this morning. But we have like 75,000 employees or so. And I actually just helped run a hackathon for anyone that wanted to participate at the company. And the whole purpose, the whole problem statement was effectively, what can we do about our dashboard craze situation. And believe it or not, like outside of this hackathon, since January 1st, there have been about 25,000 dashboards that have been deleted. So the idea is like, what is going on with so many dashboards and reports that are now all on the cloud? And so, yeah, it's a serious problem. And I don't think that for larger corporations, at least, I kind of feel like the thought has been just create a dashboard. If it's not used, like, don't even really think about it. You know, if like, yeah, if we need to delete this later, we can, no big deal. But there's costs associated with all this and the resources that are used to just keep those online. So yeah, this whole hackathon was done to really try and drill in on, like, can we put some strategy behind a rationalization approach or some kind of decommissioning approach or strategy to all these different reports and dashboards that the company has. And it's not just, I'm not just talking like 25,000 shiny apps would be incredible. I'm talking more like reports and dashboards across all of our platforms, Power BI, Tableau, MicroStrategy, etc.
The hackathon sounds really cool too.
Yeah, the winners did an excellent job coming out with kind of a solution that had more of that like prescriptive insights for leadership. So I'm really excited to see what we do about maybe productionizing that as kind of a shiny app or something like this for leadership to have a clear visibility into like how many reports should be on a decommissioning path or et cetera. Yeah.
Honest, I see your hands raised. Do you want to jump in?
Sure. So I guess one gentle way to test the waters for governance for some of these dashboards is to, if it gets updated on a constant basis, try one period to not update it or 1 month not to update it and see what reactions you get. And if it's a live feed, try to cut it off and see what reactions you get. Now, if no one says anything and they're not really paying attention to it, then that's a good sign. And you can say, okay, this is probably not being used as much as it should be, or as much as expected. But obviously, if you hear people express their dissent and say, no, we rely on this data, then that's a good indicator to say that the dashboard's still relevant. And the consumer, it's stakeholders still need it to be in place and active.
Thank you. Yeah. I see Abigail, you have your hand raised here too. Do you want to jump in next?
Yeah, so we monitor our usage of dashboards. I mean, like, that's really the start. Like, Tableau has APIs. I don't know what other tools have, but like, you can see who's looking at your dashboards and when. And so being able to go in with like, nobody's looked at this in 3 months, like, that's a really strong argument. Like, literally nobody's using this. And even then, nobody wanted anything deleted, but we were able to get permission to basically hide dashboards nobody was using except for people who are actually building the dashboards, write some documentation that says what all the ones that are in hibernation do. So like in the future, if somebody wants to bring it back, they can read that and say, oh, I needed this, but it's not something that we're having to worry about maintaining on a regular basis.
Do you think sometimes it's that like the dashboard or whatever visualization was really helpful for someone when they first saw it, but then they don't know where to ever find it again?
No, because nobody's looked at it in 3 months. I think people just really get freaked out by the idea that like somebody spent time working on building this thing and you're gonna get rid of it. And so like we promise we're not getting rid of it. It will still exist if you ever need it. Yeah. I think was like the safe thing, even though really some of these are never coming back.
Mm-hmm. George, I see you have your hand raised here too. You want to jump in?
Yeah, we actually did that with the dashboard because it was a Power BI dashboard and it tells you when it gives us reports that no one's using it. And so we decided to stop updating it and found that, okay, they actually did need it, but not as frequently. And so I think like just going back to the requirements for building it and understanding, the frequency of that. And so just having a discussion about like, what were the expectations So realizing, oh, they really only need it like once a quarter, but you know, we built it in a way that could be done like every day, like they, you know, but we didn't need to update the data every day. So, you know, sometimes it's just understanding the requirements and not necessarily going to think, well, they don't ever use it. Well, when they use it, it's super important. It's just not frequent. Yeah.
Absolutely. I see all this fun chat happening during the Hangout too, and I am jealous I don't get to read it, but I'm going to read that all after too. I love to see the party happening there. But there was a Slido question someone had asked anonymously. I try to save code tips that I can see uses for in later projects, but I feel like it's so messy. How do you all keep track of frequently used code notes and tips? And Marcos, I see your hand raised here.
So I didn't think you'd see it in time before someone else started talking. I work in Python almost exclusively, like at work, and I think I mentioned that before. And you know, we do a lot of Jupyter notebooks for interactive things, which I know people have a lot of feelings about. But I am determined to put as much code as I can into GitHub. So we have GitHub repositories for our main like production things that are controlled. Our team has, my big pricing team has a repository that's basically scripts, and some of the scripts can be things that we run automatically, but some of them are just like, it's just a repository that anyone can push to. And so if I write anything that I think is cool and that I want to use later, and I think anyone else will have any benefit of, I will put it into like a utility scripts folder in there, and it's version controlled, and I'll tell people about it, and then other people sometimes will contribute to it. And then I also have my own little secret private Marcos repo, where if something isn't quite baked enough to share with everyone, I will save into my own repository. And so version control and Git and GitHub, if you have access to those tools, are a really good way to not lose stuff into some one-off file or some one-off Jupyter notebook or whatever. And so my strategy is to write as much as I can inside an editor and save it into a Git controlled code file. And then if I need to use it in a notebook, I will import it into my notebook, which you can do with Python pretty easily. That I'm not exactly sure how the R folks think about this, since I was actually, when I use R, I was terrible at writing functions. But that's kind of my strategy. And so if you haven't learned about Git and version control, highly recommend either chatting with other folks here or just trying to learn more about it.
Definitely. One resources I know is like the Happy Git with R book, if anybody wanted to share that in the chat. But Eugene, I see you have your hand raised.
Yeah, functions. Just functionalize it, give it a descriptive name, put it in somewhere that I created a company R repo, or R package. Just titled it the company name. Everybody had a copy of it. Everybody could make edits. Everybody could update those edits, and every single function it just became more and more generalized, which is the best thing about writing functions and enforcing that everybody writes functions. And you can't finish writing your function unless you actually create a manual page, and which is the best part about it. So I know it takes, an extra 10 minutes, and it's such a hassle, to add that 3 sentences of documentation that describe the arguments and what you want to use it for. But I mean, the overall build of productivity over time is just, nobody has to resolve the same problems. We all have to convert dates. We all have to convert zip codes. We all have to add leading zeros. We all convert things from factors to strings or strings to factors, et cetera. Count the number of factors. Like, just build functions that do this stuff. Just build them and leave them there. And anytime anybody has a problem like this, in your team meeting, you say, hey, what new functions were added this past week? It's very simple to get that sort of, it's exponential productivity that you'll get across the team.
Do we need a data science hangout GitHub and packages? Katherine, I see your hand raised here.
Yeah, I was just going to comment that, like, even if you're not on like a full data science team in an organization that has GitLab and our professional tools, like, before I was at Centene, I was the only R user and a data science team of 1. And I basically made a setup script for myself that had some of my most helpful functions in it. And in my little profile, I said, put all these in my session at startup. And so it was a function for dealing with dates in the format that I knew that they came from my database and things like that. Like, even if you're just doing it for you, it's still a good practice. And then if you do onboard more people and you can share that script with them, and then eventually make that business case like, hey, we do need a GitLab license so that we can share these things as our team grows and as our organization grows. Like, and if it does still just be you, you've made your own life better.
Of course. Yeah. Thank you all for the thoughts here too. Before leaving this topic, I was kind of reminding myself, I think Mike Smith, you talked about this by using like snippets too.
Yeah, snippets are fabulous, right? Because you kind of give a little shortcut, and then it gives you a skeleton or a framework where you can jump into certain parts within that framework and kind of almost auto-complete certain sections. You can share snippets. Use this allows you, has a way of opening up the snippets so that you can edit them. But, so for things that you do frequently and where you actually have that framework, they're really, really helpful. But I think I'm leaning more towards what's just been said about right functions, right?
Mm-hmm.
Because it's like you can also then document those, test them, you can roll them up into a package.
For some reason, writing a function just sounds scarier to me than the word snippet.
Well, it does, because writing a function implies that you're going to write the documentation and you're going to maintain it forever, right? Whereas a snippet, well, it's a bit more throwaway, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I think just a point to add to this, and this is something that I try to do in my company, is also sharing that you've done this with others, making sure it's on your knowledge-based solution, because then you find out, oh, this has already been done by somebody else and I didn't have to put all this effort if they'd only share it. So I think contributing to the community is important internally just as well as it is externally.
I see there was a question, Isra, you had asked, is there a place that Posit shares functions created by the community? And Curtis, you had some thoughts there. Do you want to jump in? Or Curtis, I'm putting you on the spot there. Sorry, I just saw you had commented on there.
I was kind of half joking, trying to do it lighthearted, but like that's usually what packages and trusted GitHub repos are for. But I see the point, there's this kind of middle ground or like lower ground with like a cookbook type thing. So like the first book I ever bought related to R was the ggplot2 cookbook, which is literally just a collection of great tips for ggplot2. So I totally see the value.
Let me go back to see some questions we maybe had missed. Oh, Libby, I saw earlier you had a question around collaboration. Do you want to ask that one?
Did I? It was probably about time. Like there's a lot of conversation around like, we really want people to collaborate, and how do we get them to talk to each other, and how do we get them to form a community and be more connected because we're all remote. And my question is, do they have the time to do that? Because if they don't, you are expecting something magical. Like it's not going to happen. And so the push that I'm trying to, go for is like prioritize timing, prioritize chunks of people's time for that stuff. If you don't tell them to do it and that you want them to do it, give them the time to do it. It's probably not going to happen because they're going to be heads down and feeling too pressured. And I was thinking about, there was a Harvard Business Review article that I read recently about capacity, about how people do their best work when they're actually about 85% capacity or 80% capacity, not 100%. And aiming for people to be at 80 or 85% does free them up a little bit to have the mental and emotional capacity to connect with other human beings, to share stuff. And we have all this double work and we have all these silos. Guess what? If people talk to each other, those walls start to break down and you start to realize other people are duplicating work, and you start to realize what's possible because someone says, oh yeah, I did that in this other project, and maybe it's not the exact same thing, but it's going to help. So that's my 2 cents, I guess, less of a question, but are you prioritizing your people having that time?
I love that. Thank you, Libby. And I think Mike has some thoughts to share on it.
Sorry for being the guy that jumps in here, but
you don't have to be sorry.
I've been the R guy at our company for many years, and before we really got our community going, everyone came to me. Oh, Michael know the answer to this. Oh, Michael helped me to solve out these installation issues. Oh, Michael helped me answer this tricky question I've got about how to do this thing. So, and that then funnels everyone in through me, you know, and that you might argue that that's great for my brand, but it's, you know, making me beyond 100% capacity, and then it's hard to keep up with all the requests. And it means that I have the same question again and again and again and again and again, and it gets really tedious, because even though I bang about it and go, you must do it this way, everyone's so busy and they're like this, and it never gets through. Once we have the community in place, we have a single source of, here's the information on how to install R, here's the information on how to, you know, get the packages you need. Here's, you know, we have that place for the written documentation. We have our community sessions that say, if anyone's got questions, they come in through that community page and anyone can answer that question, right? So it's absolutely vital that the community gets going, because otherwise it all funnels through your regional, local friendly R expert, and that person just winds up burning out. So, you know, it's kind of, you know, we've been talking about the ROI on taking time to build community, but without it, you're going to have, you know, someone's going to burn out because they're at the sharp end of that funnel. Sorry, voice of experience, and also feeling thankful that my SWAT team is there and we're building community every day. So big up the SWAT team.
That's great. Yeah, big kudos to the Pfizer team there and all the different community efforts you lead. Gerard, I see your hand went up on this topic.
Yeah, so when COVID hit and everybody started working from home, what we did was I established tea time a couple of times a week for the team to get together, and there was a very simple rule. You were only asked to talk about work-related things in the last 5 minutes, but it really helped to have that interpersonal connection with the people in the team. And so you kind of knew if they were stressed, if they were doing something fun at home or whatever. And then in those last couple of minutes, you could quickly ask, you know, what they were working on. Did anyone need any help? You know, do we need to make any connections between different teams? And so to Libby's point, yeah, the more you, if you don't force it, you know, those conversations don't happen. And like, because the first couple of weeks of COVID, no one talked to each other. Like everybody was just doing work. And that just didn't work. So after initiating that tea time, that at least that forced conversation really helped in multiple ways, not just socially, but also in keeping that collaboration and that networking going.
I'm thinking about how we've talked about like the power of automating something that was once manual and how that helps you like exponentially down the road. But it's almost the same with the community efforts. Like you need to take a chance to like step back and look at the big picture and create that community so that it can help everybody later on down the road, and that you're not just the one person who everybody's going to for questions, and that there's so many others that are supporting each other. Eugene, I see your hand is raised too.
Yeah, I mean, it's an interesting concept that the documentation and the building functions for a team and having your team iterate on the functions I don't think people recognize that that is its own collaboration. It begins literally the collaboration. I remember when I was hired at really like my first management gig, and I walked in on the R code that they were using, and everybody was on a different version of R, and everybody was using different versions of packages, and everybody had 3 or 4 different templates to do basically a similar version of the exact same analysis. Theirs worked for them. They had certain functions that had certain edits for them for one of these particular use cases. I mean, it was terrible in terms of overall productivity, and building models took literally 3 days. And it took me about 6 months to a year, but in a year, I had people building models in 4 hours instead of 3 days, right? And we were all using the exact same R version, and we were all using snippets of functions that slowly got better because somebody finally put one into a package. And when somebody checked out that function and actually did something with it, it broke for them because they were using a slightly alternative use case. So what did we teach them to do? You add a new argument, and then having that new argument, you add that to the documentation. And then on the bottom, you have these edits you make that you just add an if-else statement, based on that new argument. And now the function does both things for both people. And this literally began the collaborative process. And there were, people who took 2 years to finally check in their own brand new function, even though they were making edits of functions in the meantime. And it was a big, yay, Amanda finally checked in her first function, woohoo, and the package grew and more use cases were handled, and our entire library of code got better, and our ability to talk to each other. Hey, didn't you build something that did that? Didn't you build something that solved a similar problem? And if it doesn't do the exact same thing you do, you get to be the unit tester and figure out how it works, and then you build experience with Git. Now your resume grows because you have experience working with repos, you have experience working with version control, you have experience modifying functions, automating your work. All these things are like, you're solving the collaboration problem, you're solving a productivity problem, you're solving the ability to actually contribute and build these skill sets that every future job is going to need from you. I mean, the whole thing is literally like, you can solve, in my opinion, multiple problems just by trying to centralize your code and get everybody to work together on similar codes, similar projects. And it doesn't even have to be similar, but we're all data scientists, and we have to be like, wild people, sometimes writing SQL parsers, and then suddenly you can talk to the database people and they build a scripting function that builds a SQL parser or builds SQL queries for them with a few arguments. And we had that experience of being able to finally hand off SQL queries or SQL query builders, like to our own business analysts that worked in SQL all day. And yes, we used R to staple all this text together and build SQL queries. And they were just amazed. They were like, oh, this is how you guys get that done so fast. Yes, and you can do it too,
I love that. I love how passionate you are about it, but also that, yes, and you can do it too. One last question I wanted to ask. I see Priyanka asked a question that it's kind of on the same topic around making time for community, but for the team builders and leaders here, how do you encourage your teams to keep upskilling while continuing the business as usual?
I'm really lucky. I have Sam Parmer on the team, and he contributes to our weekly. And so, it's I see that as part of his job too. It used to be a hobby. Now it's actually part of his job. But Sam collates that information anyway, but then internally they produce a little kind of monthly blog post to say, what are we seeing is the latest, greatest. And that helps enormously.
That's great. Any other thoughts on encouraging your teams to keep upskilling?
I'm going to say the same thing that I did for community stuff, which is like, put that time into people's reviews and into their weeks. Like I've had jobs where it's expected that 10% of my time is upskilling, and I need to be able to talk about it. I need to be able to say, like, this month I used 10% of my time to do X, Y, and Z. And if it's a part of the accountability for somebody, then they know that they're allowed to do it.
Yeah. Any other
It's hard though, right?
thoughts?
Back to also what was said earlier, that you know, your focus on your day job to get stuff done and off your desk and out the door means that it's hard to assign time to learn. I was just thinking there that we have people who learned base R, you know, like 15 years ago, and they haven't even got to the tidyverse yet. And then we've got other people who learned the tidyverse 5 years ago and aren't aware of the kind of, you know, most recent changes to functions. And so you know, you've got to keep that ball rolling and continuous improvement, and just kind of keep chucking it under people's noses.
I like the ideas of like actually putting it on your calendar. I see Tony, you mentioned you're encouraged to use 2 hours per week upskilling. I've been thinking about this with, I talked with our president yesterday about sometimes I have a tendency to want to focus on a lot of things and a lot of different ideas and making things better. But it's also important to like pick what is the most important thing that I want to focus on, and trying to like block a whole day for that, just as dedicated focus time. Tony, I think, do you want to add something there?
Yes, it doesn't always happen, but if you can have that goal and maybe put 2 hours on your calendar, especially if you have a remote work day, and can avoid having meetings during that time. A lot of times it seems hard to do because of the immediate needs, the fires that you have to put out. But it could pay off in the long run, because something could take a lot less time because you've already got that baseline of knowledge on whatever skill it is you need. So it's definitely worth it if you can find a way to fit it into your schedule.
Definitely. And George, I see your hands raised too.
Yeah, I wanted to share my latest tip or trick for upskilling. I'm going back to the old days of using RSS feeds in my Outlook, and something that, you know, you used to see back in like a long time ago, 90s, early 2000s. So now I get our bloggers and a lot of other resources sent directly to my Outlook application. And, you know, every time you see that little number saying how many unread messages you have, I know like, okay, there's another article I'm going to keep up with. And that's been really, really helpful for me lately.
That's a great tip. Well, I know we are a little bit over on our time here, but thank you all so much for jumping in the conversation today and being the featured leaders here. I love to see all of this, the chat happening as well, and I'm excited to go read that later. But thank you all again so much for joining us here today. And I wanted to let everybody know that next week, Joe Chang, our CTO at Posit, will be our featured leader. Joe's the creator of Shiny. And that will be our the last hangout before our summer break. So we'll be off from hangouts for July, but we'll be back the first week of August. So yeah, next week with Joe Chang. Hope to see you there too. Bye, everybody.